Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? Back in 2015, Carrie Elwes released a book called As You Wish, which was a behind the scenes glimpse into the making of the Princess Bride movie from 1987. And let's get into it. I first heard about it on a movie podcast. They brought him on as a guest. He was making the rounds promoting the book. And the audiobook, especially, you guys know how much I love audiobooks, is worth the extra bang for your buck, if that saying makes any sense at all, because a whole bunch of the other cast members, as well as the director, Rob Reiner, contributed to it with their own 2 cents. I believe in the print edition, their dialogue and stuff is still in there with little segments and asides that they wrote, but it was really special to hear it all in their own voices. This was a somewhat popular book when it came out, I guess. I believe it was written in the late 70s, early 80s by William Goldman. But it was conceptually challenging to adapt to the screen. Much like the final product that did make it to the screen, the book is a story about a story. There's a second level to it, although there's not the grandfather and the grandson. It's William Goldman imagining sharing the book with his son because it was shared with him by his own grandfather when he was sick. And he was from a fictional European country of, what was it? It wasn't Flanders. It was something I've already forgotten. It was like whatever fictional country in The Princess Bride was actually a fictional country, but in world as a meta level thing in this book. You see, it's already complicated to explain. But they figured out what kind of storytelling mechanism they were going to use to get the point across in film. And then from there, it was a matter of adapting a lot of the humor of the book, because the book had a lot of omniscient narrator commentary. It was also presented as if it were an abridged version of a much longer, like pointlessly longer tome. Like a narrator would butt in and say, here's where we cut out 40 pages of her packing and unpacking her bags over and over again. And you also get to meet Buttercup's parents in the book, and they have a terrible marriage, and they're keeping score as they snipe at each other over petty slights and stuff. These are things that it would be so trying to get the point across on screen, whereas it flowed so seamlessly in the narration of the book that when they did finally figure out how they wanted to tell the story on film, a lot of it came down to the mechanisms and asides with the grandfather and the grandson, as well as the uniqueness of each particular performance. Carrie Elwes himself was a critical casting. Obviously, you've got to get the romantic, dashing, swashbuckling male lead down, and then same thing with Buttercup. You got to have the Princess Bride herself be. It's got to be possible for the entire audience to fall in love with her. Elwes was, I believe he was some kind of unknown before this movie came out. Obviously, this was the movie that made the entire rest of his career. Robin Wright, who played Buttercup, she was running the soap opera circuit at the time. And Elwes explains in the book how those contracts were notoriously difficult to break. And rather than getting her out of the contract, the studio was able to pay whichever soap she was on or work something out with the contract, where like as soon as she was done filming with Princess Bride, she'd come back and she'd have that many more episodes to do, for the soap in LA. And I believe she was only about 19 at the time. That was before her brief marriage to Sean Penn. She was still just Robin Wright in that first one. But the behind the scenes stuff it's just fascinating. It kind of changes the way that you watch the movie. There was a stretch of filming where Carrie Elwes had a broken foot because Andre the Giant liked to bring his toys onto set, his toys being four-wheelers. They were fun for helping him get around. And Carrie Elwes rode one and broke his foot, and it was right around the time that he and Mandy Patinkin were set to film and choreograph and all that, their fencing scenes. Mandy Patinkin played Inigo Montoya. And so they had to completely shuffle around the filming as he healed from that foot injury, and he explains which scenes in the movie you can tell that he had the injury based on how he favors his foot. There's a scene where he's the Dread Pirate Roberts, and he's talking to Buttercup, and he's got this really, really pained expression on his face, and he's trying to play it off as something else, but you can tell, like, oh, that must have been when the meds were wearing off because his foot was messed up. The Andre the Giant chapters were just wonderful. He was a beloved public figure, and sheesh, I was in like second or third grade when he died. I remember how big of a deal it was. Like, he was a celebrity the world over. Elvis explains why Andre the Giant had it wasn't so much of a drinking problem. The man had an incredible tolerance for alcohol, but he explains why in the book. Andre was always out drinking. One of the more interesting tidbits was that for the Vizzini character, played by Wallace Shawn, Shawn was extremely self-conscious about taking that role, and he thought that he was going to screw it up and they were going to fire him because he had heard that they originally wanted Danny DeVito to play the diminutive Sicilian, because, hey, he's also short and small, and he's got the fiery temper that this character demands, as well as him, being Italian. But Rob Reiner, he is of a certain descendants, and calls up people that he knows to play certain characters. So, hey, we need an avenging Spaniard. We'll get a Jewish guy. We need a scheming Sicilian. We'll get a Jewish guy. We need a giant. Okay, we're limited on this one. We'll get the Frenchman. But it wasn't a matter of in-group favoritism. It was a matter of what casting should be, and that's that. Let's get the best person that we can to play this role. Nobody's doing a blood test on screen. Wallace Shawn can play Sicilian. Mandy Patinkin can really nail the accent and the look of a Spaniard. And on top of that, he can bring in the physicality that role demands. Cary Elwes talked about how they got Olympic fencers to come in and train him and Mandy, so that they knew how to handle the weapons in a way that looked authentic and seamless. It took them a long time to figure out the blocking and the choreography to make the fencing scene on top of the Cliffs of Insanity look a lot more dynamic, instead of it just being like, okay, we run around here, we fence, we fight, whatever. When they first figured it out, they showed Rob Reiner, and I think the scene was originally maybe 60 to 90 seconds. And he looked at it, he's like, that's it? That's what you guys have come up with? Like, okay, we need to dress this up a little bit. You got to move around here. You're going to come across to the top of the tower. You're going to do some gymnastics and stuff, do some backflips. And one of the things they came up with to prolong that fencing scene was Wesley and Inigo both fighting left-handed at the beginning. It added a layer to their characters, and it prolonged this action-heavy scene, which was everybody's favorite scene when that movie first dropped. I remember whenever we watched that movie with my family, my dad especially wanted to stop whatever he was doing and watch the fencing scenes. There's more to it than that, but I don't want to give all the good stuff away. It's worth it for you guys to pick up this book and read it. And again, especially do the audio version, because they bring in Rob Reiner and Mandy Patinkin and Wallace Shawn and Robin Wright and all these other figures who had a role to play in the movie, and to share their 2 cents and their insights on it. One final note I will say is that technology really saved this movie in the end. Because in addition to being difficult to adapt, it was also very difficult to market. How do you sell this movie? They also struggled figuring out how to end the movie. But when it finally hit theaters and it had its run, it had an underwhelming return. But this was right around the time that VHS started to pop up as this emergent technology, and more people could watch movies at home. And home video is where this movie really took off. A year or two after it left theaters, Cary Elwes said that he noticed, he'd be in a cafe or something, and he'd place an order, and the barista chick would look at him and say, "As you wish," and he's like, "Wait, what?" And it started happening more and more, and that was really between between home video and word of mouth, the Princess Bride became the cultural touchstone that it is now. And so that just adds value to the behind the scenes stuff on the back end of it. Knowing what it took to make it, and the speed bumps that it hit, and all of the little anecdotes that popped up after the fact, it enriches the experience of watching it. One final story that I'll share is after Wesley and Buttercup come out of the fire swamp and they're captured by Count Dugan. The part where Wesley gets hit over the head by the six-fingered man and his sword, he actually got knocked out. There were a couple of takes that apparently didn't look convincing enough, and Wesley, Cary Elwes, told Christopher Guest, he goes, "You can hit me a little harder." He goes, "Okay." They do the scene. The next thing he knows, he wakes up in a hospital and they're putting stitches in his head. And he's like, "What happened?" He goes, "No, he actually brained you and put you under." And that's the scene that's in the movie. So check out As You Wish by Cary Elwes, and I especially recommend the audio version. But hey, if you read it in print, let me know how it goes. You can buy a copy of it with my affiliate link in the description below. I will get a small commission. Till next time, drive safe. See you out there.